Shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome to Bible Learner's Corner. We are going to have a discussion talking of a tree when it's planted and growing. A tree planted and growing, and what comes out in the end when a tree is planted. Planting a tree, watering the tree, how the working is done, and finally there is going to be harvest. Planting a tree, watering, working, and harvesting. As we read the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, the Bible says Paul planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. This is as we read in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 6 to 8. When a tree is planted, the tree is sown. The tree planted continues to grow. It matures and starts producing fruit. It yields fruit. And when the fruit is ready, then it means there is harvest that is taking place. And when fruit is harvested, when there is this harvest of the fruit, inside the fruit there is a seed, or there are seeds. This is uprooted. That's why we need to know that there is the source whereby we have the seed planted. The seed is sown in the ground. The watering is done. When the tree is planted, it starts growing. It matures and yields fruit. And this is a tree cycle. As we are having the discussion talking of a tree cycle, we already have shared a discussion talking of a tree cycle. Someone may ask a question: what is a tree? And what are the features? Well, a tree is the source of life that the body of all living things need to sustain their flesh. There is a tree in the natural. There is also a tree in the spirit. These are trees that are parallel. They are comparable. When we have a tree in the flesh, it is a tree that is the source of life that the body of a living thing needs to sustain its flesh. Besides the spirit of a body, every living soul needs food for the stomach. And it is the food, nutrients, that keep the body healthy. The food comes from the plants that are grown in the ground, and this ground is a cursed ground. That's why we need to know that a body needs to eat bread. it needs to eat food that comes out of a tree. And the fruit cannot be there unless it's come out of the seed that was planted. It grew, matured, and produced fruit. So when we understand that a tree has a root, a tree has a stem, a tree has got leaf or leaves, a tree has fruit, and inside a fruit we find seed. A tree can be green or dry. A tree can be tall in height. It can be short in height. It may be fruitful or unfruitful. A tree can also be upright or crooked. Therefore, as we have said, a tree needs to have a root, stem, leaf, fruit, and seed. And a tree can be green, can be white, can be red, can be dry. A tree can be tall in height. It can be short. And also a tree can be fruitful, or a tree can be unfruitful. A tree can be upright or it can be crooked. We need to know that trees came into this world in the natural at the beginning of time, when God created the heavens and the earth. As we are talking of the origin of trees, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." This is as we read in the book of Genesis chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. God, at the beginning of time, creating all things, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Soon after God made mankind, he blessed mankind and said to them to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. As we read in the book of Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, that God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food." God speaking to the first mankind, Adam, and his wife, Eve. Out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that was pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as we read the book of Genesis chapter 2, verse 9. In verses 16 and 17, the book of Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17, and the Lord God made the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Now the serpent that was cunning, as we read in the book of Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 3, the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, as the serpent tempted the woman, he said to the woman, Eve, did God really say, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. This is as we have seen in the book of Genesis chapter 3, verses 1, 2, and 3. In verse 6, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband Adam, and he did eat. Now, from the accounts of God's creation in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it can be clearly understood that God, by his word, commanded the earth to bring forth trees. Out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. And the land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. We therefore need to know that every tree produces fruit of its kind. There are good trees, there are bad trees. And as we are going to have a discussion talking about tree cycle, someone may ask some questions. Which came first? The tree, plant, or fruit, that is seed? Is it the tree that is planted? Or is it the fruit that produces seed? Which came first, the tree or plant, or fruit with seed? We will be back shortly to have the discussion talking about tree cycle. A tree, plant, fruit, seed. A tree, plant, fruit, seed. Stay tuned.